Welcome to Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe, where you'll find the unique, the bizarre, and sometimes the haunted. Feel free to look around, peruse the items, and never fear, there's nothing here that bites. Hard anyway. Hello there. How exhilarating it is to see you return yet again to Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe. I am your shopkeeper, Chris Baker, and today a very interesting item. This is an old television set, small by today's standards, and while this has a color picture tube, it has seen its fair share of black and white television and movies. But this set, while not haunted in and of itself, pull out the rabbit ears and turn it on, and the images will show terrors the likes of which you may not have seen before. And therein lies the essence of today's episode of Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe. So let's pull out the kinetoscope and take a look at the new film, Late Night with the Devil. So, Late Night with the Devil, as soon as I found out about this movie, and it's one of those movies that I knew it was coming out. They actually filmed throughout 2022. It debuted at South by Southwest in March of last year, I believe, but didn't get its US release until now. But it's a movie that I've been looking forward to, even when I didn't know anything about it. Late Night with the Devil, it's about a TV talk show, late night talk show in the 70s, and it deals with possession, and it stars David Dastmalchian, and I am a big fan of David Dastmalchian. He is one of those character actors that always seems to get secondary roles and tertiary roles, supporting roles in a lot of the movies and things that he has been in, and every time I see him, I'm just always enjoyed the characters that he puts on the screen, and I've been waiting for the right movie or TV series to come along where he could be front and center and he could be the leading man in a movie, because I think he's got that in him. He's done so many different things over the years. He's been in Dark Knight, Blade Runner 2049, The Suicide Squad, Ant-Man. He's been in that. Of course, he also did a couple movies. Oh, he's also in Oppenheimer as one of the latest things that he's done. But a couple of his more recent movies are two movies where I really enjoyed him, and he was really a highlight of the movie. His portrayal of Wojciech in Last Voyage of the Demeter, unrecognizable. I didn't realize that was him when I first watched that movie. It wasn't until I got well into the movie, I'm like, who is this? And then the credits came up, and I'm like, oh my God, that's David Dastmalchian. And I really loved him in that. I also loved him in The Boogeyman, which also came out last year, and that was a movie I didn't really love. I didn't hate it. It was okay. It just wasn't the Stephen King short story. But one of the things I did enjoy about The Boogeyman was David Dastmalchian playing Lester Billings, the lead character from the Stephen King short story of The Boogeyman. He just played a brief part in it, but that's the movie I wanted. That's the Boogeyman that I wanted. I wanted a period piece set in the late 70s, starring David Dastmalchian as Lester Billings, and I wanted to see the short story that Stephen King wrote played out like that, with Lester Billings played by David Dastmalchian. That's the Boogeyman that I wanted. Not the Boogeyman that I got, but he really did play one of the more enjoyable things about that movie. So when I found out that he was doing this movie, Late Night with the Devil, I was on board right off the bat. And then when I saw the trailers, I thought, oh wow, this looks like it could be really good. Now this is a movie that is put out by Shudder. Shudder is one of the laundry list of studios and producers and distributors. You watch the beginning of this movie, and there are like, I don't know how many, like 9, 10 title cards of different studios that were involved in releasing this, and I'm glad. I don't care how many people it took to put this out, but as long as it came out, and I'm glad I got to watch it in the movie theater. Now, if you haven't watched it in the movie theater, I suggest going and watching it in the theater, because One, it is a great way to support this movie because it really is. If you love horror movies, this is an interesting idea, albeit a fresh idea. Now, I know demonic possession movies come a dime a dozen these days, and a lot of them feel like ripoffs of The Exorcist. Well, this doesn't feel like a ripoff of The Exorcist. They even reference The Exorcist in it in a very fun way, but it's not a ripoff of The Exorcist, even though it does have some Exorcist vibes in areas, but I think that is more homage than like ripping off the story of The Exorcist, which we get a lot in possession movies these days. But I would say go check it out in the movie theater. But if you don't get a chance to watch it in the movie theater, or maybe your movie theater isn't playing it. I know my movie theater did play Late Night with the Devil, but it only had like 3 showings a day. Some theaters may not actually be showing this. If you have Shudder, and Shudder is well worth what you're going to put out for it, $5-6 a month, well worth it to at least get it for a month to watch this movie because it comes out on Shudder April the 19th. I'm super excited for that, so I can watch it again. That's because this movie is really interesting to watch. It's set in 1977, late night talk show host, and we'll get into more of the details once we get into the spoiler section, but a late night talk show host trying to make a rebound, needs to become the #1 show to get that big contract, and it's the lengths with which this host will go to become the #1 late night talk show host. And it takes place in 1977 on Halloween night. And of course, they're doing like a Halloween special, having psychics, having skeptics, having a woman who wrote a book about a child who is possessed by a demon who was a part of the satanic church. All of these things on this show that lead to catastrophic events. And it's everything you could want in a horror movie. And like I said, it's interestingly done. I mean, you get that first little bit that's almost like a documentary, because this is sort of a found footage film, but not in the traditional sense of found footage. It almost plays like a documentary where you get this brief little intro about David Dastmalchian's character, Jack Delroy, his backstory, and here is the episode of his late night talk show we're going to play in its entirety. And I have to say, Michael Ironside does the voiceover for the little documentary at the beginning of this movie. A great, I don't know if he's in the credits. I know if you like look him up on Wikipedia or something like that, he's not in the cast listing, but yeah, that's Michael Ironside doing that voiceover. Just a fantastic actor, and an actor that's no stranger to horror, fantasy, and science fiction. So it was really cool to see him show up. But once they get into the broadcast portion of this movie and what we're seeing on the screen, I thought it was really cool because everything that takes place during the show, when the cameras are on and they're broadcasting live on TV, it's all done in the 4:3 aspect ratio that you would have got on the square TV sets of the 60s, 70s, 80s, most of the 90s. It's all done in that 4:3 aspect ratio. It's all done in color. It's all filmed like with the cameras of that era. So it's a little bit grainy. Not every picture is crisp and clear. And it looks like you're watching a broadcast, a late night talk show from 1977. But then when they cut to commercial, then they switch the aspect ratio. You get more of a widescreen aspect ratio. It goes to black and white. It's newer cameras. So even though it is black and white, things are a little more crisp and a little more clear. For me, sometimes when you flip-flop between aspect ratios, it can be a little distracting. I didn't mind this because it really set the tone for what you were watching, and it really made a delineation between what you're watching on the screen, what you're watching in real life. Now, some of the stuff that takes place during the commercial breaks, it does feel like it gets away from the found footage aspect of it, because there wouldn't be these cameras backstage watching these interactions between people. But it didn't bother me as much as it probably would have in another movie done in a different way. But it was a real interesting idea, a real interesting setup for this movie, doing it almost as a real-time late-night talk show. The set and the costumes were all really good, felt very period accurate. I mean, it felt like you were watching a talk show from 1977. The special effects were really good. They weren't heavy at all, but a lot of them were practical, and even the digital effects almost felt like digital effects of the time period that this is in, which I thought was a nice touch. The script, while it did feel a little campy at times, I don't think that was bad script writing, and I don't think it was camp for camp's sake. I think it was just being period accurate, because you go back and you watch old TV shows from the 70s and 80s, or you go back and watch some archival footage of talk shows and stuff from the 70s and 80s. Some things were a little cheesy by today's standards. So I don't think it was cheese and camp for camp's sake. I think it was very much cheesiness that was period accurate and really fit this format. And the other thing I really loved about this movie was and we'll get into some more particulars in the spoiler section, like the atmosphere and things they set up and scares. I don't want to give too much away, but we'll talk about that. And that was really good. But the acting I thought was fantastic. David Dastmalchian plays Jack Delroy. He felt like a TV talk show host from 1977. He just had all the mannerisms, that tone of voice. It felt, watching him on this talk show, Night Owls, it felt like maybe like an old episode of the Dick Cavett Show. And I really dug that. He really played this part so well and made this work, because in a different actor's hands, it wouldn't have felt like you were watching a period piece. It wouldn't have felt like you were watching a show from the 70s. They would have had all the trappings and all the garb of 1977, but the performance, sometimes people can pull off performing period, and some actors can't do it as well. And David Dastmalchian does it perfectly. And all the other actors I thought were really good. And not a lot of actors that I'm terribly familiar with. As much as they all look very familiar, I looked through their filmographies and just haven't watched a lot of what some of these actors have been in, like Laura Gordon. I thought she did really good as Dr. June Ross Mitchell. Ian Bliss as Carmichael the Conjurer. I have seen him on several things, and a fantastic actor, some of the Matrix movies and whatnot. Faisal Bazai as Christou was really good. Ingrid Torelli, I think, was a standout as the young girl Lily. Rhys Oteri as Gus, kind of the Ed McMahon sidekick to Jack Delroy, was really good. And I love this cast. They were all really fun to watch and really fit the period and really got the characters that they were playing. And while this is a bit of a slow burn movie, it is definitely well worth it, because there are so many things that pull you along. Like, you get little increments of creepiness and atmosphere and tension, and what the hell is this leading to? Because it's going to culminate with this girl being possessed, and they're building up to that, but there's all these other elements that are introduced leading up to that how does this all fit together? And it creates a bit of a mystery that, while this isn't a terribly long movie, like an hour and 26 minutes, I believe. I know Wikipedia says an hour and a half. My movie theater said an hour and 26 minutes. So, we're splitting hairs here. That's not that much of a difference. It never loses steam in its slow pace, though. I guess that's probably what I'm trying to say, is it's not a very long movie, and it never feels too long, and it never feels too short. I mean, they really, I think the pacing was fine. Like I said, bit of a slow burn, but once you get to that climax of this movie, it is balls to the walls and definitely worth the time you spent getting there. So go check it out. Late Night with the Devil. It's in theaters now. If you don't get a chance to, or you're not able to watch it, it's not playing in a theater near you, it is coming out on Shudder on April the 19th. So I can't wait for that to give it another watch or two, because it was that good. And there's not a ton of movies that come out anymore that make me want to watch it again. Even good movies. I'm like, I liked it, really liked it, but I don't care if I watch it again. But this, I do want to watch it again, because this is definitely a movie that's going to have you thinking at the end of it as to what did I just witness, and in a good way. And I can't wait to watch it again and see if maybe I missed something, a bit of explanation that would put the pieces of the puzzle together a little better. But go check it out, Late Night with the Devil, in theaters now. If you haven't watched it, go see it, then come back, listen to my thoughts on this movie as we head into the spoiler section. But if you have watched it, or you just don't care one way or the other, we are going to head into that spoiler territory. So like I said, when this movie started out, I really liked how they did kind of this documentary style intro where you're watching an old TV set on the movie screen and it's playing this documentary, and it's all about our two primary characters, mainly Jack Delroy, played by David Smallchain, and you get a little bit with the Lily character played by Ingrid Turelli. And Jack Delroy becomes a late night talk show host and is always trying to be the best. And if anybody who's lived through the 60s, 70s, 80s know that Johnny Carson, when it comes to late night talk shows, he was the king of late night. And Johnny Carson is almost a character in this, even though he never shows up. He is referenced multiple times because Jack Delroy is chasing Johnny Carson. He wants to be the number one late night talk show host. And to do that, you got to be able to beat Carson. It talks about his time in this kind of clandestine group called The Grove. And it is playing off the Bohemian Grove stuff for all the conspiracy theorists out there. Kind of plays off of Bohemian Grove, kind of the Skull and Bones sort of thing. These group of men, powerful men in Hollywood and in politics that meet together and they reenact very ritualistic things, and I'm sure somebody's going to bring up something about sacrificing babies or whatnot, but he's a part of this, and it gets mentioned and brought up on occasion because they don't want you to forget that he is a part of this, the Grove group, and that they are very powerful and influential people, and that they may or may not be doing some sketchy cult-like things. And speaking of cults, they also go into the story of Lily, who was born into a satanic cult, and this cult was into blood sacrifice and guns. And it almost felt like a play off the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas, where the compound burned down, and they kind of change it up a little bit. So it's not like that, but the leader of the satanic cult sets his own place on fire and essentially burns all his followers alive. But Lily, who was born into this cult, is ferried away by somebody. I can't remember who exactly they said got her out of there, but she was taken away as a baby from this cult before the whole place burned down, and was taken in by the Laura Gordon character, June Ross Mitchell, who writes a book, Conversation with the Devil, because Lily, as she gets older, into her teens, it's discovered that she's possessed. And you have to set up the Lily and June character because they are going to be the final guests on this late night talk show, and the reason that we're watching this movie to begin with. Possessed teenager. But then after this documentary sets the scene, then we get into the late night talk show. And like I said, it plays out in relative real time. So we're going to talk about this movie primarily through the main character that we get with this, David Smallchain's Jack Delroy. Because, I mean, this is the character. This is the character whose perspective we are following throughout this whole movie. And everything kind of filters through this character. So we'll primarily talk about this character and talk about some of the other characters as they relate to him. So this character is really interesting because he becomes a late night talk show host. He is trying his hardest to beat Carson and just isn't doing it. But then all of a sudden his wife gets cancer, and he has his wife on the show. She's in the late stages of her cancer, and she's been going through chemotherapy. This is the episode that he almost beats Carson with. He comes within, like, I can't remember if they said one rating point of beating Carson, or at least tying Carson, but he didn't. Then not long after that, his wife passes away and he goes away for a little while. I don't think they ever really say exactly how long he's been gone, but this episode that we're watching is his comeback. It's a Halloween episode. It's his first episode back, and he needs to beat Carson with this episode or he's going to lose his contract and lose his show. And I really liked how David Dastmalchian plays this character of Jack Delroy in regards to this, because there are so many scenes where you see that broken man who's lost his wife and is just trying to make it in the world, make it with this show, the pressure that's on him in spite of the fact that, he's probably still grieving his lost wife. And David Dastmalchian does that so well. You felt that empathy for a character that is going through loss and is going through almost a second amount of loss, because if this episode doesn't do well and he's not re-signed, he's going to lose his show. And essentially he'll have lost everything. So he's willing to do anything. And that's why he's having this spectacle on Halloween night. It's not about the psychic Christou. It's not about the skeptic Carmichael. It is about having June Ross Mitchell, who wrote this book, Conversations with the Devil, and her young ward, who is possibly possessed by a demon, Lily, on his show because he wants the world to see that this girl is possessed by a real demon. And that is going to be what sends him to the top. And while you feel for him in his loss and in the potential loss of his livelihood, the loss of his wife and the potential loss of his livelihood, you also see the ambition of how far, like I said, he'll go to keep his show on the air, to have that success, to have that fame, to be number one. And I liked how that progressively got more intense, because at first it's, we got to do this. We've got to make this show number one. But there towards the end, when things are in jeopardy, you could see that spark of maybe not anger, but that intensity of a man that is trying to do everything to save his show and will do everything and anything to save his show. And David Dastmalchian does a really good job with this. I enjoyed the scene with him and Faisal Bazai, Christou, the psychic. I thought that was really interesting. I like how they play that because, in the 70s, you had a lot of psychics. They were a big thing. They'd have them on television. Johnny Carson used to do a spoof on being the psychic. But I like how he's trying to do a reading and it's just not working. And then finally some guy do you mean Peterson? Or, oh yeah, that's what I meant. And every time he guesses who he's supposed to be related to, the spirit that's talking through Christou, he's just not playing along. And I also like the fact that they reveal that guy was a plant in the audience. But it was fun to see that not working. And then once he starts talking to this other couple, a woman and her daughter, about a brother, the daughter's brother, and the woman's son who passed away, that kind of got a little creepy. Maybe this guy is legit. I mean, it's a movie, but you feel so much like you're in the audience with this movie and this show the whole time. But you feel like this might be legit. You find out later that Christou had somebody going around asking audience members questions and shit like that. So that wasn't even on the up and up, even though it looked like it was working. But then when Christou gets that message, and almost like a bullet to the brain, it hits him. And there are ties between what Christou is receiving and Jack Delroy, his character, that was kind of creepy, but it was a good launching point. It was a great way to show that there are things going on this set with this episode in this movie that are beyond the ken of mortal men, things that we can't understand, and something. It was kind of like the launching point and the stepping off point for the creepy, spooky, psychic things that are going on. I also liked the introduction of the Carmichael character played by Ian Bliss. I thought the Carmichael character, one of those former magician or conjurer, if you will, turned skeptic, trying to debunk psychics and paranormal activity and stuff like that. I liked the relationship that Jack Delroy had with Carmichael, and almost a friendship, albeit a little contentious at times. I liked the back and forth between Carmichael and Christou, a psychic trying to prove his mettle and a skeptic trying to prove the psychic is a fraud. That was interesting and felt very much of 70s talk shows, late night talk shows. But really the main event of this movie is when the Dr. June Ross Mitchell, played by Laura Gordon, and her ward, Lily, played by Ingrid Torelli, make it to the show. And we get that scene where June is going to coax the demon out of Lily so people can see it. And it was really creepy, but it was very much like, I've seen this before. I've seen this in like every other exorcism movie. The girl starts talking in a funny voice, and she's got cracks on her face, and her face distorts a little bit and changes a little bit. And I'm like, I've seen this in, like I said, every other exorcism movie since The Exorcist. It looks good. The practical makeup was good, and all that was fine. When the demon starts talking to Jack, and you almost get the notion that the demon has a history with Jack, and like, okay, what's going on here? This will make this seem a little interesting. And I have to say, as much as at first I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of looks like every other exorcism movie I've seen, I have to say that this was probably by design, because they wanted to lull you into that false sense of security that this is something I've seen before. I think in one hand, it's a homage to things like The Exorcist. In the other hand, I think it is kind of a false front as to what you're really going to witness as a demon possession movie. I really loved the scene where Carmichael decides that he's going to try and debunk what June and Lily just showed on the screen, and he takes the sidekick character Gus, played by Rhys O'Terry, and do hypnosis on him. And I loved the whole scene with the watch, the pocket watch, the effects they did, changing the face of the pocket watch to that kind of spiral, and you get some close-ups of it, so it's almost like you're being hypnotized along with Gus. And that scene where he plays into Gus's fear of worms, and then Gus starts pulling the worms out of his neck and ripping open his stomach, and all these bloody worms coming out was gross and disgusting. A lot of cool practical effects there, maybe augmented with some CG, but it looked really good regardless. And then you find out it's all hypnotic suggestion, that Carmichael not only hypnotized Gus, but hypnotized everybody in the studio audience and everybody at home watching this on TV. And I liked how they played the footage back and had them replay that, and you saw where Gus didn't have any worms coming out of him. That was kind of cool. I like that. It was a nice effect. Whether they'd be able to replay things like that quick back then, I don't know. I wasn't working in television back then, so I don't know. But I didn't care, because I thought it was a nice touch to show the hypnotic suggestion. And of course, Carmichael saying that that's what June and Lily did, hypnotic suggestion. And then they go to replay the Lily footage of her being possessed, and finding that little glitch in the film that they slow down, and then you get that image of Jack Delroy's wife standing behind him. And it was just creepy and haunting, and that's where shit goes off the rails. Those last few minutes of this movie, everything leading up to it was worth it. The slow burn, and I don't mind slow burn. I like slow burn, as long as that slow burn leads to an explosion. Some movies are slow burn just for slow burn's sake, and they slow burn and then they just fizzle out. That, I can't abide that. You've got a slow burn leading up to something. You gotta like that match. You gotta set that fuse ablaze. You've gotta let that fuse run, and then it's gotta hit a powder keg. And this certainly hit a powder keg. once Lily starts to go into possession mode again, shit gets real. And I loved every second of that. When she kind of levitates off the chair and you've got the lightning or whatever going through her hands, and then her head kind of splits open. The imagery of that was just freaking chilling. I mean, my God, you had her head split open and the two eyes wide apart, but they're looking at you. You've got this fire and energy in between her brain. It was part demonic looking, part like almost alien, otherworldly looking. It was just chilling to watch. And I'm watching it and I can't take my eyes off of it. And for the first time in a long time, it just scared me. It was chilling. And like I said, scary to watch this imagery on the screen. It was just unnerving, probably the best way to put it. And then, of course, she starts killing Guest. She twists Gus's neck. She slits June's throat with a necklace. She sets Carmichael on fire. I love how Carmichael did what a lot of skeptics did in that time period in the 70s and early 80s, where they would offer a check, a big cash reward for anybody that could prove psychic phenomenon really existed. The Carmichael character, to me, seems based on the gentleman James Randi, who through the 60s, 70s, 80s, even in through the 90s, offered cash rewards. I think it started out at $1,000, then it became $10,000, then a friend of his donated. I think it got up to like $1 million, but they ended up discontinuing it because nobody collected the money. No one could prove their supernatural or psychic abilities, even down to the look. I mean, it's not an exact match of Ian Bliss as Carmichael and James Randi, but the look is quite similar. And I found that very cool that they kind of were referencing James Randi with this character. But yeah, he never wrote a check, and they ended up having to discontinue this challenge, this psychic challenge that he did, so they could use the money he had set aside to pay somebody that could prove their psychic abilities. They put the money to better use. But as Lily focuses her attention on Carmichael, and Carmichael quickly becoming and admitting he's become a believer, is handing this demon the check. And the demon just kind of disintegrates it and then melts Carmichael's head from the inside out. Very disturbing to watch. I did like Gus was, I think, the first one to go, but he had a really fun scene. If it wasn't so horrifying, it would have been funny. But he pulls out the tiniest cross necklace around his neck and holds that cross out and starts saying, "The power of Christ compels you." A nod to The Exorcist that was kind of fun in the moment. I can laugh about it now. I wasn't laughing about it in the moment because it was so frightening to watch all of this play out. And as Lily kills Gus and Carmichael and June, Jack gets tossed aside by Lily and kind of escapes through a door into the back area, the backstage area. And you think, oh, okay, is this how it's going to end? But as soon as he leaves the stage area, he goes into this place. And this is one of the areas where it breaks with the found footage completely, because you're almost going inside of Jack's mind, where you see replays of old scenes that we saw earlier in the original documentary that introduced Jack Delroy at the beginning of the movie. You see some of these scenes play out different, but he knows that this isn't real. This is in, I don't know if it's in his own head, but you see some of these scenes play out differently than they did in the original documentary that opened the movie. You see scenes with him at the Grove drinking a liquid and a part of some ceremony, and then you see him talking to his wife as she is on her deathbed. And it essentially is setting up, without really coming out and saying it, but you get the notion that Jack was a part of this society, the secret society, the Grove, and because the demon inside of Lily knows Jack and made reference to the time he spent with him in the tall trees, that Jack, as a part of the Grove Society, made a deal or a pact with the devil or a demon or whoever to become successful, to have the #1 late night talk show. And with any deal with the devil, there's a price to be paid. And I've seen interviews with David Dastmalchian where he's come out and said that he doesn't think that Jack sacrificed his wife to get fame and fortune, but he made a deal with the devil and there was a price to be paid. He was willing to pay whatever that price was, and the price just happened to be his wife. And then once that happened, once he lost his wife to lung cancer, even though she never smoked a day in her life, as they set up in that first docu introduction. He took time away from the show, I imagine, to come to grips with what he'd done, and he's seeing it through. That he is going to be the number, he had to give up his wife. His wife was sacrificed for this, so he's going through with it. And like any deal with the devil, there are always consequences. It's very much a monkey's paw sort of situation where what you wish for, the price that you pay for it will keep being paid. And the devil never really stops trying to collect on you, where he lost his wife, but now he's going to have the #1 rated show, but at what price? Because you see his wife begging to euthanize her, to kill her. And when he wakes up from this hallucination, he's stabbing Lily to death amidst all of these dead bodies. And you hear sirens in the background. So now he's going to have the #1 rated show because everyone's going to have watched this spectacle unfold, but he's going to go to jail for killing Lily. I also like David Dastmalchian. I read an interview where he talked about where this character, Jack Delroy, goes from that moment where it cuts to black. He stabs Lily with this knife, this sacrificial knife that was a artifact from the satanic cult that she was born into. And he repeats this line, and I can't remember what he says, but it is a phrase that Carmichael says to get people out of the hypnotic state, the hypnotic suggestion that he put everyone under. And it kind of shows that Jack feels like he may be in some sort of hypnotic state and he doesn't know what is real and he's trying to get himself out of it. Kind of a, this can't be real, this can't be happening sort of situation. But you hear those sirens, you see that look of shock and, oh my God, what has happened on his face, and then it cuts to black, roll credits. But I like reading some things that David Dastmalchian has said about the Jack Delroy character and where he might have gone from there. Because he said if the first responders don't get there in time, he probably kills himself because of what has happened. All of these people dead. They tease the fact that he and the June Ross Mitchell character are in a relationship, and she's reluctantly helping him by bringing Lily onto the show, even though she knows it's a bad idea. He's lost his, potential new love. It's almost alluded to as well that he has a flavor for different naked ladies, from what his wife said in the one little clip from the episode where she appeared. Almost makes you wonder if the relationship with June Ross Mitchell didn't start maybe before his wife died. I don't know. There's a lot of things they kind of allude to with what the wife said about his penchant for liking naked ladies. He may be a little of a player. There's a lot of backstory that this movie alludes to in regards to the Jack Delroy character that they don't dive into, but they give you enough taste to think that, okay, maybe the empathy I felt for him and the sorrow I felt for him and what he's going through maybe wasn't as earned as I thought it was in the beginning of the movie once I get to the end of the movie. But the state Jack Delroy is in at the end of the movie, he's lost June Ross Mitchell, who is obviously a romantic interest of his. All these people are dead. His show, it may be #1, but he's killed a young girl, a teenage girl. He is in ruin. So yeah, he would quite possibly kill himself as a result. Like David Dastmalchian said, this character would have killed himself if first responders didn't show up in time. If the first responders do show up in time, he spends the rest of his life in a mental institution. And that's the kind of thought I like hearing actors put into characters. I love to hear when actors, they don't just read the lines, they really develop these characters and backstories and what this character would do if this happened, or what this character would do if that happened, even if those situations never play out in front of the camera. I like when an actor of this caliber, like David Dastmalchian, I like when he, talks about the different avenues, the different thought processes that this character would go down. And it really makes me appreciate the fact that he's put a lot of thought into this character, who this character is. And I think some of the best actors, and I think that's why he gets so many character roles and so many supporting roles, because he cares enough to understand the character that he's playing. Hopefully that starts to translate into more lead roles, because I think David Dastmalchian is a really good actor, and I'd love to see him do more in horror, fantasy, and science fiction. He already does a lot in horror, fantasy, and science fiction, but like I said, a lot of supporting roles. I'd like to see him start getting more leading roles in horror, fantasy, science fiction, whatever genre you want. I think he is a really good actor, and this movie showed that he can lead a movie. He can be the star of a movie and really carry a movie, because like I said, all of the action flows through him. All of the story beats flow through him. And he did a really good job carrying the weight of that. Another actor that I really enjoyed, Ingrid Torelli, I thought did a fantastic job as Lily. She added an innocence and a creepiness that comes with the territory. When it comes to teenage girls in possession movies, you almost have to have that air of innocence and that air of creepiness. But she took it to another level. Just the weird looks to the camera, the slight smirks that she would make to the camera, the way she looked at David Dastmalchian's character, Jack Delroy. And it was just very bizarre. And for as much as this is a girl with a demon inside her that we show needing to be coaxed out, you almost have to wonder how much of the demon really is in control most of the time. Because there is an innocence that never feels put on, but it feels like she's way too sweet and innocent. It almost feels like a false front by this demon putting this on. The demon's more in control than it wants people to realize. And that when we get those moments where the demon lashes out and unleashes itself, that is more a result of the power welling up inside this young girl, and the dam being about to break and burst forth. And then when you get that final scene where like the head splits open and all hell breaks loose, that is the full fury of this demon. And it's one of those things where everyone probably has a different take on it, but that's kind of what I like to think, that the demon's more in control of this girl on a day-to-day basis than that sweet, innocent smile would suggest. And Ingrid Torelli did a really good job with this character. She had all the sweetness and the innocence, the very charming smile and the charming demeanor and the carefree demeanor of a 13-year-old girl, but she also played that undertone of sinisterness, if you will, that undertone of something is wrong with this child. And then, of course, letting the demon loose. She did a really good job with all of that. And I thought she was a standout in this. As much as Ian Bliss stole a lot of scenes he was in, I think Ingrid Torelli was the standout of this, though. For all intents and purposes. You had some really fine performances, starting with David Dastmalchian and Ingrid Torelli right behind him as two of the more impressive performances in this movie. But it definitely was a movie that my brother-in-law and I talked about it on the way home from the movie theater the night we watched this. And I said, this is a movie that I got to sit down and think about before I can really form any clear thought opinions on this because it just had so much going on and so many things left unsaid. It alludes to a lot of things like the Grove and his involvement in that, and it never really says it out loud at the ending, but it alludes to a lot of the things that you're supposed to put, two and two together to make four. And I love a movie that just doesn't spell things out for you. It does make you think. And there is so much going on imagery-wise. It takes a minute to wrap your mind around what you saw because so much of it was bizarre and weird, and it played into paranormal phenomenon that just kept building and building, and you're like, did I notice everything I was supposed to notice? And at the end of it, you know what you just watched. You kind of understand, you get the gist of where this was going, but did I miss anything along the way? Because it's definitely a breadcrumb trail that the breadcrumbs just keep getting bigger and bigger until you have the whole story right there in front of you at the end. But there again, you're not sure you got every breadcrumb along the way. You know you got to where you were supposed to go, but did I see everything that was supposed to help me get there and make a fully formed opinion? So that I cannot wait to watch this again once it comes out on Shudder, coming up in April the 19th. But really a wonderful movie. Gotta give all the credit to Colin and Cameron Cairns. They both wrote and directed this movie. They're a couple Australian filmmakers. This movie was filmed in Australia, and you got a lot of decent stuff coming out of Australia these days. Of course, I wasn't a huge fan of Talk to Me. I did not like it. I enjoyed it well enough. I think it was a little overrated. Everyone was acting like it's changing the game in horror. I don't know about that. It had a couple really good scenes, but I didn't love the movie. I enjoyed it. I liked the movie. I thought it was a good enough movie, but still a good movie all the same. That one come out of Australia. This one coming out of Australia. Australia's starting to, not that they haven't made a name in the world of cinema, but in the world of horror, a lot of good horrors coming out of Australia these days, and it makes me want to see more from the Cairns brothers because I haven't really watched anything that they've done. I know they've done a few things, but nothing that I've seen. So really looking forward to seeing what they have coming down the road, both from a writing and directing standpoint. I thought the soundtrack was really good. It was of the era. It was of the 70s, but not over the top caricature. And that's, I think, one of the things I appreciated most about this is that from the set design to the costuming to the needle drops and the music, it all felt of the era. It all felt of the 70s, 1977, without being a caricature of 1977. And I appreciate that. Having been very young in 1977, but around during 1977, I appreciate that because that is a time that I do remember, even if it is vaguely. That's a time I remember with a bit of fondness, the late 70s into the early 80s. And I love that they had the care to do it right and not, like I said, make it a caricature or a parody on the 70s. Now, I know the Cairns brothers got in a little trouble, and there are people boycotting this movie because they used AI for some of the artwork in this. In between segments of the show, back in the 70s and early 80s, shows would go to a title card and have a funny picture. A lot of the late night talk shows did that. Have a funny picture and we'll be right back printed on it. And they had that in this. And there were some pictures that were created with AI, and people are losing their shit over this. And I have to say, I understand AI is a big boogeyman right now. And I think AI, if done wrong, can be a hindrance to real artists. But I also think AI can be a tool. I work in radio advertising. I write and produce commercials for radio. And some of the salespeople I work with and some of the clients that I work with think that they can just go on ChatGTP and create a script for the business that they either own or that's is the client that they're trying to run advertising for from a salesperson perspective. And there's nothing I hate more than that, because one, it's taking the advertising out of my hands. I've got 30 years in the business. I know what I'm doing when it comes to writing and producing radio commercials. People with no experience, i.e. clients and sales reps, let the professionals do it, is what I say. And usually you can tell a ChatGTP AI generated script, it's usually just full of a bunch of cliches and some of the most ridiculous scenarios, horrible dialogue, and they're usually way too long. So I have some experience with people trying to replace what I do with what AI provides, and it usually never turns out well. But that doesn't mean that you can't use AI. I mean, I've used AI in writing commercials to come up with an idea for that starting line, because that's an important line. And maybe, I'm just having a little bit of writer's block. I'll type in what I want for a first line as far as information and just see what ChatGTP comes up with. Usually it's nothing I will ever use, but sometimes that will spark an idea. For this podcast, I've used AI for show ideas. When I'm not talking about a movie or a TV series, I want to do a Halloween special or a Thanksgiving or a Christmas special, I might use ChatGTP to come up with ideas for a show idea. Again, I've never used anything ChatGTP has given me, but I'll take what that gives me and maybe, okay, I like where they're going with that, but what if I did this? And go off in a completely different direction, but I use ChatGTP and AI to kind of get the creative juices flowing and get me to think in a direction I wasn't necessarily thinking before, that got me off on another different direction and ended up being the finished product on the podcast. I know a lot of podcasters. Any podcaster out there bitching about AI and using AI to edit your show, I don't use that. I've been in radio for 30 years. I may not be perfect at editing a show. It's much different than a commercial, because I don't want to have to re-record segments where I can re-record a line in a commercial, but I edit all my own shows. I mean, that's what I do. That's my stock and trade, writing and producing commercials, recording and editing audio. But there are a lot of podcasters out there that use AI to edit their shows, or use AI to come up with scripts for their shows. And while that's not me, I wouldn't begrudge anybody who did that, because, everybody has their own creative process. And while, this artwork that they used for Late Night with the Devil may have taken the job away from somebody that would have created these images with computer graphics, there were a lot of other people that worked on this film. So it's not like they took away tons of jobs. And this is a brief thing in the movie that a movie that was done on a really small budget. I mean, I'm not sure what the budget was, but you can tell that this wasn't a big budget movie. So they decided to use an AI image generator to create some frames for this and cut some costs, cut some corners. It's not something that I would suggest every filmmaker do, but I can understand why the Carnes brothers did this. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm not saying it's wrong. They did it. They have to live with what they did, and it's nobody else's fucking business. There again, not that I want to see AI taking everybody in Hollywood's jobs, but, to each his own. Everybody has got to live with the decisions they make and how they make their art. And I, for one, am not going to cast aspersions on the Carnes brothers, because they used a little AI to create some artwork. How many fucking podcasters and people on the internet are bouncing around AI images? Why didn't you pay somebody to do that art for you? Come on, it's fucking hypocritical to me, because there's a lot of filmmakers that use AI. Denis Villeneuve said he used AI to make the eyes blue in Dune. They used AI in Across the Spider-Verse to do some animation movements that would have taken so much longer to have somebody animating it digitally. So, people use AI in films all the time, and you can't equate one AI that is being done like creating a simple image just to throw on the screen for a few seconds. You can't compare that to using AI to replace people and to replace, script writers and all that. It's not the same. There again, like I said, I'm not saying the Cairns brothers are right or wrong in using AI, but I can understand it. So ultimately, I love this movie. I thought it was really good. It's, to me, one of the more interesting horror films I've seen in a long time. Well, it's not new subject matter in demons possessing a teenage girl. I mean, we've seen that 1,000 times. I think it was a really interesting and different way to apply it to film. And they did things different than you're expecting with a demon possession movie. And that ultimately made it really enjoyable. When you add on top of that a really interesting and different and a fresh take on an idea, you add that with a really good cast and a really good leading man like David Dastmalchian, and I think, he's a leading man now. He's not just the character supporting actor in movies. He's shown he's got the chops to lead a movie. You've got fantastic acting. You've got an incredible look and feel. This movie was creepy from start to finish. I mean, the way they applied the paranormal aspects of this film gradually, and it just kept building and building and building until you got to that explosive climax. I thought they did a really good job creating an atmosphere and a tension and an air of unease. There was an air of creepiness about this movie. David Dastmalchian does creepy, odd, bizarre characters very well, and usually his characters are a little, not over the top, but they're out there, and you didn't get that. His was a little more reserved and subtle, but just some of the looks to the camera and the different emotions you got from him, from the sad, from the anguished, to the creepy looks on his face where he knows what he's doing. He knows he's poking the bear. He's poking the demonic bear to try and get ratings. And there are many scenes where he has this air of creepiness about him because, like I said, you feel sorry for him at first because of what happened to his wife, because of the pressures of the show. But then you realize that he's willing to do dangerous things and put people in danger to get that number one slot. And then when you ultimately realize that he sacrificed his wife to get there, maybe not intentionally, but he did sacrifice his wife. He's not completely a bad guy. You still feel empathy for him and what he's wrought, how his actions and the dealings he's made have come back to bite him in the ass. But you go from really empathizing with this man because of what he's gone through, and you end up still empathizing with him, but empathizing with him from a standpoint of, oh God, if you had just not done this, you wouldn't have this happening to you. And he plays this so well. But the atmosphere and the creepiness and the special effects, like I said, a lot of practical effects, some digital effects, but it meshed really well and it really fit the 70s vibe. And I loved that, the 70s TV show vibe, from the aspect ratio to how they filmed it. I didn't mind the jumping back and forth between aspect ratio and color and black and white, from on the stage, live on the air, and behind the scenes, backstage. I didn't mind that. I thought that really, for me, worked as a storytelling look and device. But one of the things I think really added to the creepiness, added to the uneasy vibe that you got, is as you're watching this, you felt a lot of times like you were in the audience with this studio audience watching this unfold. So many times actors, there were scenes where like Ian Bliss would look to the camera and speak to the camera. Other characters would look to the camera and it was like they were looking right at you, looking into your soul. It felt like you were in the audience watching this all unfold, which added that extra level of unease to the whole thing. Not only are you seeing all this play out in what almost looks like documentary style. It looks like archival footage. It looks like something that happened in 1977 and we're just seeing the footage. But not only does it feel like that, but it also feels like you're in the studio watching this unfold yourself, personally, along with this audience. And that added an extra level of creepy atmosphere that, well, I haven't felt in a very long time. I can't remember the last time I felt as creeped out and as legitimately scared as I was without having a single jump scare in this movie. I mean, there were a couple moments that maybe could have qualified as a jump scare, but there weren't really any jump scares. This was great horror filmmaking where they didn't rely on cheap jump scares to fill this movie. They relied on atmosphere and tension and visuals and the horror that is playing out in front of your eyes, which I give that all the respect in the world. AI artwork be damned. And last but not least, I thought the message of this, there were some themes going on with this, not just the horror and all of that, but there were some messages that I thought came through, and they were maybe not quite subtle, but you weren't beat over the head with, hey, we're trying to say this about society, but you have a message and a theme that really relates to today with everybody on social media, TikTok or Instagram or Facebook. Only the old people are on Facebook now, but TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, stuff like that, where people are trying to create content and they're just doing whatever it takes, whatever be damned. They're going to do whatever it takes to get the likes and get the people commenting and get the people talking, whether it's doing the stupidest things, whether it's doing the most horrific things. People will do anything for that little taste, that little not even 15 minutes, but 15 seconds of fame, and the lengths people will go to for that. I think there's a commentary on that. To me, it almost felt like the Jack Del Roy character went from wanting to be like a legitimate talk show host, but with this comeback, he was willing to go to greater lengths, the more sensational lengths to try and be number one. It kind of reminded me of Maury Povich. Back in the 90s, Maury Povich was like kind of a straight up talk show host, but he never got ratings until he turned his show into a baby mama show and started doing almost sensational Jerry Springer type content. And I thought that was an interesting commentary on people who do talk shows and who are willing to sacrifice their morals and their moral compass to do whatever it takes to get the ratings, because ratings mean money for a lot of people, including the hosts themselves, and the some things that people will do for $1. I really dug that sort of social implications to the themes of this that really resonate. I mean, they resonate from the 70s through today, but especially today with the advent of social media and social media influencers. So I want to thank everyone for listening to my thoughts on Late Night with the Devil. You can check it out now in theaters. If you don't get a chance to watch it in the theater, I encourage you to do it. You got to really support good horror movies like this, especially the lower budget ones. They're doing a lot with a little, and show Hollywood that these movies can make money and that people want to watch movies of this quality. But if you don't get a chance to, you can check it out on Shudder on April the 19th, which I'm really excited because I want another chance to watch it again, maybe a couple more times. But I want to thank everyone for listening to my thoughts on Late Night with the Devil. Excellent new horror film. I'm not going to say the best of the year, but it's definitely in my top 10, maybe top 5. I don't know. We'll see how it all plays out by the end of the year. But this one is probably one of my favorites, if not my favorite so far this year. Let's just put it that way. So thanks for listening to my thoughts on Late Night with the Devil. You can check out more with Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe on our Facebook page and Instagram page. We're always posting about horror, fantasy, and science fiction, and our latest episodes, talking about what's coming up and all sorts of good stuff. So check that out. No matter where you're listening to this podcast, please like, follow, subscribe to it, that we can stay on top of all the new episodes. We've had some bonus episodes this week. We may have some bonus episodes next week. There's a lot of stuff going on, and you can stay on top of that when all the new episodes drop by liking, following, subscribing. Also, Leave those reviews. 5 stars would be awesome. Whatever review you leave, we appreciate that. And share this podcast with anyone that you know that loves horror, fantasy, and science fiction. So until next time. Thank you for visiting Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe. We hope that you found something to your liking and visit the shop again soon. But even though you may come back, you never really get to leave Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe.